Today I'm going to show you how to reprogram the mileage on a 2002 to 2006 Jeep Wrangler TJ cage cluster. This procedure will apply for the 2002 to 2006, but not the 97 to 2001. 97 to 2001 is a different procedure. It's the same as for the 97 to 2001 Cherokee, which I've already done a video of. You can go reference that if you're doing the older gauge cluster, which is actually easier to do. This one's newer and a little bit harder to do, and it takes some more specialty equipment. So I'm going to run you through that process today. To do this, you're going to need a little bit more specialty equipment. In this case, I'm using a DigiProg 3. This is a dedicated tool just for reprogramming mileage. It'll support a number of different vehicles, including the Wrangler, the older Cherokees, newer Wranglers, the JKs, a bunch of other things, BMW, Audi, Mercedes. There's a ton of stuff that it supports, but I'm just interested in Jeeps right now. I've got my cluster out on the bench, and I'm ready to do this as kind of a bench exercise. It's not really possible in the vehicle to do it. You'll need to pull it out, get it ready on a bench, get your equipment set up. To do this, I have removed the rear plastic cover. So as you can see, this snaps on the rear, and I need to do that because I'm going to be hooking in right here onto the circuit board, and I got to attach some wires to it in order to reprogram it. And if you look at the white cover, as you can see, the circuit board is just covered up there. Interestingly enough, you see this little area that's open in here. That's kind of for the BDM pad. So factory, when this was being produced, this was left open so they could set this on a jig. And then if you'll see, there's these little pads right here. And these come through the white plastic, and pins would come down onto this and program it. So the original programming is done through these. You can actually connect your lead here, solder it on these big pads, and do the same thing. But there's also this convenient little spot right here, and if you can kind of see it, it's called CN4. It's kind of dark down in there, and basically it's for a surface mount component there, well, I guess pin header to go on, and I've gone ahead and soldered in a little pin header here, so it's an 8-pin pin header. Normally on all production models this won't be here. I've done it because it's a little bit easier for me on the bench to do this. If you're just doing this for a customer's vehicle or something where you're not keeping it around as a development board, don't bother doing this. Just take your wire, solder it on to where this pin is or on one of these pads, reprogram it, and then take your wire off. But you'll need to connect in here for the programming side of it. I've also got a couple of flying leads, you see, plugged into the board. So for example, this one over here is one of the connections on the TJ cluster. You don't actually need it for doing any of this benchtop programming. If you're just doing programming and you want to verify the mileage reads right, you'll need this plug, this white one, for power and ground, and then you'll put on your two programming connections down here. This plug is a pretty common Chrysler one. I got this out of a Grand Cherokee. It's in a bunch of other stuff. If you need to find one in a junkyard or something, you don't have to get it from a Wrangler. It's easy enough to find others around as well. So I've got that. I'm going to use the white plug here for my power and ground connection. You could remove this plug and just clip directly onto the power and ground down in here, or likewise you could solder on right here for power and ground as well. I've just done this because it was easy, and I can then just clip on two things over there. But there's a couple different ways you can go about it. I like just clipping on here. I think it's a little bit easier. So that being said, we're ready to do this. Okay, so I said we're ready to program this, and I've got the DigiProg cable hooked up. And so if you can see here, I've just kind of temporarily got these things twisted on. It's not really a permanent setup, and I need to remove these and connect them up to other boards in the future, so I don't need to make a permanent test rig here because I won't just use it for Wranglers, I may use it for other things. So I've got them twisted together, and I just keep them from shorting out. If you can see this, these colors in the cable tend to vary a little bit between different models that you get, so you'll need to verify based on the documentation which one is which. and what they should be going to, because depending on which one you might get, it might be a little bit different. And what you'll want to do is go into this DB, what is that, 25? Yeah, I think that's, yeah, 25. So go into the DB25. They are labeled down in here, and you can verify which pin is which, do a continuity check down to here, and just make sure you know it, and hook these up based off of what pin they are. So that's how we'll need to do it. I believe this is this pin layout on my cable, my black, which is my ground going over to the white power connector. Black was 13, and then the green here was pin 18. Let's see, there we go. And then the let's see, red was pin 17, and red's also one of my communication cables. So I've got 17 and 18 are my communication cables because they're on these alligator clips I've got running off. And let's see, the black was my ground, and then I have my white as my 12 volt DC power, and I had the white on 25. So that's what I'm working with here. If you get different colored cables, just be aware that you should ring them out from here to the wire and then figure that out. So I've got power, ground, and then my two programming lines, which is kind of a 50-50, so if you swap them around, you won't hurt anything. All right, so what I'm going to be doing is connecting up my green wire, which was pin 18 on the DB25. I'm going to take my green wire, and I'm going to connect the green wire onto pin 2 of this connector. Again, I soldered on this little header to make it easier for me, but you'll want to do pin 2. So we're to the left of the white plug. There is a small label that says CN4, so this is CN4 connector. There's a index number right here that's a 1. And okay, that's a little tricky. I've got it on. You see I'm using the rubber of the alligator clips to kind of isolate them. There's definitely better ways to do this. I just have this equipment right now. It's easy for me to make it work instead of trying to find something. So I've got that connected. I'm going to take my DB25. I'm going to plug it into the back of the DigiProg. And let me just scoot all this stuff back. Okay, I'm going to show you the power up of the DigiProg here. Okay, warning saying don't do this for anything illegal. Okay, password is 1. Hit OK. Alright, so now I'm not doing EEPROM directly, I'm doing car truck. And I get to scroll down through all these. And Jeep. I'll go down. There's Wrangler. Alright, so this is with an HC12. I believe the HC11 is found on some of the 2002s, so the connection might be a little bit different if you have one of those earlier clusters. But definitely 2003 to 2006 will be the HC12. So that's what I'm going to pick here. C56, C76, those are EEPROMs that are not found on this board. They're found, I know the C76 is found on the older ones. And then 2007, that would be the JKs and up. So there are different options here, but for the last series of TJs, you want the HC12. Alright, it's telling you to use plug 51, which is the tool that I've got up here. See, it's plug 51. Alright, so I got plug 51 on. There, it read some EEPROM. So now it's saying my old mileage was 800,855, which I was messing with this before, so that's why it's a really weird number. Now new mileage, let's do there. Now you'll notice it says kilometers, and this is a US gauge cluster, so it's all in miles, but it just says kilometers on here. So be aware, you're not programming kilometers, you are programming miles. I've entered in my mileage. I'm going to say OK. Okay, and so it wrote it, but you see it didn't write it quite exact. Not quite exactly what we wanted. And I believe what's happening here with this is the last place there, it only is going to write that data to the EEPROM every 100 miles or 100 kilometers or so. And I think it's doing this because EEPROMs have a limited number of writes. And so if we drop it down and we only write to the EEPROM every 100 miles or so, we'll have enough writes that for the life of the vehicle, we won't burn out the EEPROM. So I believe this information is stored somewhere else in the cluster, maybe in some kind of flash memory, and it stays there. So when you're going to reprogram this, you'll see you'll be a little bit off. And I can go in and try to write some different numbers. I could say, oh, let me write this for 3 miles more, 3 kilometers more. It'll still end up being a little off because it's doing some kind of math somewhere. So you won't be able to get it exactly where you want it. You may be off by a few kilometers or a few miles, but you can get pretty close to it here. And also, when I see that this is what was written, when I go power it up and I look at the display, it'll be a little bit different than the display as well. So there's something going on with those last couple of digits with how you read them and how it displays it. So we'll get pretty close, within a few kilometers, 5 or 10 kilometers, miles. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up with this, and we'll power it up. So there I am, I'm done. I could go back through and program it again. I don't need to, I'm done. So I'll power this down. And so now to power up and check it, I've been using the 12 volt supply that came with the DigiProg. And so I go in and I'm going to do, so I can see both, I need to view the mileage on it. I need to give it both these power connections here. So I'm giving it power on the get that cleaned up. So I'm going to kind of do this. See, I'm putting my power in there, which popped out. And now I'll go ahead and twist these two together. Actually, that'll be easier. So one of these is key on, and one is battery, and 12 volt constant battery. So I need both of them in order to get it to power up. So I hope I make a good connection there. And then I'll hold the ground onto it. And get this turned around. Okay. There you go. So in this case, we did actually program the exact same number. There's my cluster, it's reprogrammed. So then I can let off my power. Turned off, I'll turn it on again real quick. And there it is. And just for grins, you can see there's our trip odometer at 0. And we've got no bus communication, so nothing works. And I will even do a cluster self-check. I'll turn it off. I'll hold this down. You can see now we're going to go through the cluster self-check on it. So there you go. That's the process for reprogramming these on the mileage. It should be possible to do this without a DigiProg if you've got the right equipment. So again, the BDM port back here, or pads, you should be able to connect up to it. There's a lot of information out there online about connecting up to the HC12, Motorola HC12, including you can start to look in and see the pin assignments on this chip. There's even sockets out there that you can use to connect to this. But the issue that I've run into so far is, one, getting the exact hardware setup necessary to put this into BDM mode and get into it with a terminal application from a computer. But then two, even if I get into it with a terminal application, I have to read specific memory registers, and I don't know what those are for the mileage. Now, it has to be in there somewhere, and if I had the opportunity to spend some time screwing around with it and pulling the whole EEPROM out, I could probably identify which parts of the EEPROM were the mileage and which parts of the EEPROM were application code. There's a lot of information out there about this chip. It's really common, so we could probably figure that out. I'd like to get there at some point, because I'd also like to be able to reprogram the VIN that's stored in this so that it matches the vehicle we're installing this into. So ideally, I would get my mileage displayed correct to the vehicle this is going in, as well as the VIN number, so that we know everything is matching in the vehicle and there's nothing suspicious if you go and look at the VIN number through a scan tool and you go, well, why is the VIN number different? Maybe somebody tried to roll back the mileage by installing a lower mileage cluster. So I would like to find that out, and that's something for the future in there. But for now, at least we can get the correct mileage to display and keep racking up the miles like we want to, and not having correct mileage shown on the vehicle. Anyways, that's it. Thanks for watching.